Hello. Right, I just did a tutorial for beginners for Insitux, and now I think it would be very valuable to do a tutorial for people who already know how to code. So I shall refresh this page, and just like with the previous tutorial, I'm going to do all ad lib because if I had to script it and all that sort of stuff, you just wouldn't get a video. So I've got a website open which is top 100 plus Python program examples with output. So I'm just going to go down the list and I'm going to do it in Citrix. Yeah, so add two numbers in Python. Well, this is how you add two numbers in Citrix. I'm also assuming that you haven't watched the basics video, so I will sort of chuck a lot of stuff at you. Product of two numbers in Python is just multiplication. So you can imagine, right, you've got all the basics plus blah, blah, blah. You can figure it out as well. What you can do is either go to the documentation, or if at any point you forget what is available in Insitux, you can do this snippet of code, which will go through all the symbols. It'll make more sense later. Okay. Find the square root. That's fine. Square root. There you go. So you may have noticed by now, operations go at the beginning rather than infix like other programming languages. And as you would do this in other languages, of course, it's just sort of the other way around. And hopefully you'll see the benefits of this, especially because this is a whole programming language based around this. It does seem alien. It was very alien when I was first exposed to it as a programmer, 4 years? Oh gosh, no, I'm very old. A very long time ago. It will make sense because this whole programming language is around this concept. So find area of a circle. How do you do that? Well, you do the pi times radius squared gets you the area. So I'm going to create a new variable, var. I'm going to call that r for radius. I'm going to say the radius is 10. Obviously now I can look at r and it has a value in it. And to do that, to do squared, you can just do this operation, or you can overload it with whatever you like. So 3, for example, r cubed. But as you can imagine, these expressions, as you saw earlier, they can be inside each other as you'd expect in a programming language. So here, oh wait, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do a multiplication of pi, which is just, of course, my caps lock had to turn on then, pi, and there you go. That should be the area of that circle. Should it? Am I going to stare at this for that long and try and figure it out? Yeah, I think that's correct. Okay, next one, what we got? Area triangle, area rectangle, convert kilometers to miles and vice versa. I think you're okay with that. Python program to swap two numbers. Sure, what's that about? Let's have a look. Yeah, it literally just swaps them around. It creates a temporary variable. I'm sure everybody knows how to do that. Though I will show you, you can actually do multiple variables like this. Essentially, if ever you want to know what Insitux has, you go to its documentation, which is on the GitHub. You can find that. I'm sure you can. Perfect square, absolute value. Ugh, all of this is maths. I hate maths. However, Fibonacci, I can do Fibonacci. I shall do the recursive Fibonacci function. Function fib n. So again, unlike other programming languages where you might say function fib n and then you do something, or if it's Python, you do def fib n blah blah blah. In Insitux, it's a lot more basic. We just say, okay, what is the function name? What arguments do you take? Obviously not 4, what arguments do you take? And then the very next expression just says that you don't want to do any more arguments, right? So it's very simplistic syntax. And we put an expression in here. So it starts with an if statement. If n is smaller than 2, I return n. Otherwise, and actually I'll do it really to really space out and show you. So if statements, they're just like any other operation. You put them at the beginning of an expression. You give it the condition as the first argument, the if true as the second argument, and the else as the third argument, which is optional. If you don't, it will return null. So any of these expressions, except for this 1 for declaring a function. Any expression will always return something, including print, because I'm sure you'll do print quite often. You'll notice, oh, why have I got null after my hello? It's because print returns null. It just has the side effect of printing something. So if n is less than 2, return n. Otherwise, do an addition of fib. Right, so we need to subtract 1 from one of them and 2 from the other. So if you just want to subtract 1, you can use dec. And again, check the documentation to see what all of these operations do, because a lot of them are very useful. For example, you can very quickly check if a number is odd by typing odd question mark. Check if it's a Boolean. Get the distinct items of a list. Oh my gosh, we'll do that later. So yeah, here I'm decrementing 1. I'm taking away 1. In this case, I'm going to decrement 2. And then hopefully that should just work. If I just say, oh, not 23, that might take a while. Yeah, there you go. So a feature of Insitux is that it'll have certain budgets around things. So for example, I can't create a really big list. The reason it's got budgets is because this was originally commissioned for a Roblox game called Deadline, which obviously I recommend you check out. You don't want to crash the game. So if you try and do things too many times, it will say, wow, you've done that too many times. So fib is already declared. There you go. Fib 10. That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So I'm not going to explain how recursive Fibonacci works. And this does not have to be written in such a way. You can format it however you like. But please, oh my gosh, please don't do this, right? I keep seeing people doing this. I know you want to do it, but seriously, get used to that. Get into the feel of how Insitux works, and you'll reap the benefits, I swear. But yeah, that's how you declare functions and parameters. How much time has it been? 7 minutes. Let's see what else there is. Print ASCII table in Python. Okay, so how does Python print the ASCII table? It does range 256, and then it just turns into a character. So sure, I can do that as well. No, actually, I should just be trying to get from my mind very interesting things that you can do in Insitux. So, for example, hey, I have a list, nums, and it just happens to be a range from 0 to 99. Okay. Oh yes. My gosh, I'm so sorry how unstructured this is, but really, you're not going to get a tutorial otherwise. This is how you declare arrays or lists, vectors, as they're called here. You don't need commas. You don't need commas anywhere. If you do a comma, Insitux will just ignore it. That's fine. In fact, even the syntax highlighting has helpfully ignored commas. That's not good. But yeah, so gee whiz, I have nums and I want to double all of these numbers. How do I do it? Well, you can do map times 2 nums. There you go. Now, there's a few things going on here. First of all, some programmers are not aware of mapping. So in, for example, JavaScript, that would be, oh, I have a list and I want to map through that list. And for every number in that list, I want to times it by 2. That's how you do it in JavaScript. I really need to turn off the spell check for this. But we do it differently. We say map, and then, for example, inc. No, I shouldn't do range. There. So this returns a new vector. It doesn't change the old one. It doesn't change the nums variable. The only way you can change variables is, again, doing nums. So in this case, what it does is it maps a function over a vector. It can also do it for, oh my gosh, I really hope. What is it, uppercase? I think it's still called hello. Yeah, it'll go through hello as if it's a vector, and it will return all the characters in uppercase. Obviously you don't need to use map for that. You can just use uppercase. But that is another example. Strings are also lists, essentially. Same with dictionaries, which are also in Insitux. But what's the time? Maybe I'll go over that. Well, I'll very quickly go over that. Dictionaries 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, commas are not required. Like, I could put commas absolutely anywhere in this, and it will just eat it. It will print with commas because obviously it's a bit more readable. So essentially, of course, 1 maps to 2, 3 maps to 4, 6 maps to 7. It's a dictionary. And we can use dictionaries as functions as well, which is pretty neat. So if I was to say 1, 2, 4, 5, that can be an operation in of itself. So, okay, does this dictionary contain 5? No, it doesn't. Does this dictionary contain 4? Yes, and the value is 5, right? So there's all these sorts of concepts which I can't cover in time. You'll have to look at example programs and see how they work. But yeah, what was I doing? Oh yes, this. So how did I manage to multiply everything just by doing that? Because if I try and do that, it'll do this. It will return what I just wrote with a at symbol in front of it. So what's that saying? Oh my gosh, that is a word salad, whatever. What that is saying is you underloaded the operation by 1 too few. So if I was to just do that, it would completely complain. It needs at least 2 arguments. So I gave it 1 fewer arguments than it needed, so it automatically turned it into what is called a partial closure. So they are closures. Just in case any programmers don't know what a closure is, it's when you create a function, especially in line. You just create a function whenever, or lambda, and whenever in Python. So it will actually capture values when it was created. So if you referenced a variable at some time, it'll actually capture it forever, and you can pass around that lambda, that anonymous function. There's so many words for it. But yeah, what this means in Insitux is I can use that now as a function where it will automatically add the second argument on the end. So to give another example, I could do join, and this is now a function which will join by a space effectively, because the second argument is what you want to join. So for example, I could say f is join by space. That is f now, is a partial closure, and then I can use f to join things together. So blah, 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 blah. There you go, it joined it together. But in the case of map times 2 nums, essentially, because you're underloading it, it is implicitly creating a partial closure, and it's giving that to map, and then it's mapping it over the numbers. So obviously this is a very terse way of coding, and it has quite nice applications. So for example, this will have to be in the tutorial, and then I think I shall finish the tutorial considering the time. I don't want this to be too long. It's unscripted, it's difficult. I can start with a number, I can add 10 to it, and then I can times it by 90, and then I can turn it into a string that starts. Oh no, I can't do that. Well, I can, but I'm not going to. And then I want to divide 10 by it and see what happens. Pretty nice. So this is, it doesn't have a name, does it? It's threading. It's called threading, where it will thread the previous value or the previous evaluation into the next function, or the next expression, sort of. So we start with 100, then we do plus 10, 100, multiply 90, 110, etc. So this can result in quite nice programming, because it's almost like you're creating a pipeline of data. Now I'm going to very quickly, and I should have just done this, beforehand, but I'm going to very quickly pull up an example of using, it's kind of a bad example, but fine, we'll finish with a complicated piece of code. So I want to generate a random strong password. Lots of ways to do this. This is the way that I have chosen to do it. So I'm going to create an anonymous function, a lambda, a closure, whatever you want to call it, by putting the hash in front of an expression. So for example, now this will not be immediately evaluated. I'd have to put parentheses around it for it to actually be executed. So yeah, it's a lambda. So I'm going to start with one of those, and what it's going to do is it is going to generate. What's it going to generate? It's going to generate one of 4 different categories of characters to go into this random strong password. So I'm going to map the randint function. This is going to have a lot of complex concepts, so I'm glad I'm doing this. And why don't I just copy paste from the other window? That would be a lot easier. and it's getting a bit claustrophobic. So what I've done here is, and that's what they expand to. You don't need to know that. But essentially what I've done is I've created a new function. It doesn't actually take any parameters, by the way. If you wanted to take a parameter, you would use the that, and then for the second parameter, for the third, for the fourth, whatever it is, you can learn that in the documentation or any subsequent tutorials. What I've done is I've created this function, doesn't take parameters. All it does is it maps this over these two vectors. So what will happen is it will call randint with 97 and 123 as its arguments, then 65 and 91, then 48 and 58. So it will go through any iterables that you give it in order until the shortest one runs out of items, and then it stops. So if I was to just execute this without the hash, right, it will generate this. Okay, so it'll just randomize an ASCII value. It's going to be between these 2 points, right? Because randint is doing it between 97 and 123, which is the lowercase characters. As you can imagine, those are the punctuation, those are the capitals, and those are digits, I think. Yeah. So I've created a little function that can do that now. Created a little function that can do that on the fly. Whenever I need it, just give me the 4 categories of these characters. Now, you wouldn't, in other programming languages, essentially, you would just do this all the other way around, and you'll see why, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that as the first value in my threading. So this will be passed to the next function, which is a bit strange. And this function, I'm going to use repeat. There you go. So this teaches a lot of concepts, doesn't it? So I've written now another anonymous function or closure, whatever you want to call it. So it's a function. It takes a parameter, and you can give it as many parameters as you want. I use its parameter. I stick it as the first argument, and the second argument is 4. So what that'll do is it will repeat this function, because it gets passed into this one. It will repeat this function 4 times. Now, you might be going, oh my gosh, that's so complicated, whatever, like, why are you doing that? It's because now I've got this pipeline of data. What I've done with this, if I just put a parenthesis at the end, what I've done with this is now I've run that function 4 times. Now, I could have just written repeat and then just put that directly in it, but this pipeline also means now that I can say flatten. And there you go, it's flattened it into 1. And then, okay, I want this to be a random password, so I need to shuffle it as well. And there you go, you just put the functions one after the other, or the operations in this case, because I say that user-defined functions are functions and that these built-in things are called operations. Not really important. I need to turn these into characters. So using the same implicit closure creation as always, I'm going to call map charcode. And there you go. So again, if I was to do map charcode, because that is 1 fewer instructions than map would typically need, right? It's going to need something to map and something to map over. It creates an implicit closure. It creates a closure on the fly. So when you do this, flatten, then its results then get passed into shuffle, which then get passed into this function, which has created all these characters, and then I just need to join them together. So this will be hopefully the final concept you learn. I do ... and string. There you go. And what ... string does is, again, this is a partial closure. I love this way of coding. I can't think of any other language apart from maybe Haskell, and I've never coded in Haskell, which does this stuff. So, I mean, you can't quote me that it does this stuff. But yeah, because string typically needs, because ... needs typically at least 2 arguments, because if I just call it like that, yeah, or I can use about. See, I'm actually teaching too much now. There you go. It's not external, which means you can integrate. Oh yeah, programmers, you can integrate Insitux into your own projects. You can load it on the web, obviously, because this is the web REPL. You can put it in Roblox. If you're a Roblox developer, it's quite extensible. So you can add your own operations in JavaScript or TypeScript, I recommend. So what ... does is, for example, I give it a vector and I give it to plus. So it will just
explode, whatever you want to call it, vectors, because you can actually give it multiple vectors. I said I was only going to teach one. This was going to be the last thing, and I just keep babbling on. So it'll just explode any vectors that you give it and apply them as arguments to the plus function. So when I do something like this and I run it, there you go, you get a whole randomized password with all of the 4 character genres, I can't think of a better word, all included in the password, because I just do the same thing 4 times. I flatten it, I shuffle it, I turn those numbers into actual characters, and then I concatenate them all by using this as an implicit closure. So there is a lot here, and I could handhold everything, but I think it's just very important that I get a video out. Well, no, I actually don't think it's that important, but here it is. And what I'm going to do, as with my previous tutorial, is I'm going to ask for feedback. Oh yeah, YouTube, you can leave comments. Leave comments down below. Like and subscribe, though maybe don't subscribe because I don't make that many videos. And then maybe in 10 years' time I'll be doing something else really weird. That might actually encourage you to subscribe more. But yeah, I'll be asked, please, was this an okay video? Did it go too fast? Did it go too slow? I can imagine somehow both at the same time. I'm not teaching that much. There is all the documentation. I shall link everything necessary in the comments. There is a Discord server, which I highly recommend you join. It's where we all talk. It's where you can use a Discord bot to do all of this stuff. It's where we learn, etc. But yeah, thanks for watching.